Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Unpaid Interns. Austin Render here with you. It is Wednesday, September 2nd. As we get things going here on our Wednesday episode, we'll be joined today by former U.S. men's national team defender, Alexi Lalas, now a Fox Sports commentator for soccer, as well as his time. He's got a podcast now that we'll talk to him about called State of the Union. So we'll get into Alexi Lalas here in just a few moments. Let's talk a little bit of today's top news in the sports world. I mean, this podcast is hosted from a Big Ten campus. We are here in Bloomington, and let me tell you, we're just as confused as everybody else is right now. And uh, the newest development yesterday was the president, Donald Trump, getting involved and steering things, or at least attempting to steer things in the direction of football. Donald Trump tweeted that he had had a conversation with Kevin Warren and that he was hoping that that would change and turn things around in the Big Ten. But it just, here, I finally got to the tweet. Had a very productive conversation with Kevin Warren, commissioner of the Big Ten Conference, about immediately starting up the Big Ten. Would be great for everyone, players, fans, country, on the 1 yard line. Then the White House and the Big Ten confirmed that this did in fact happen. This was a conversation that took place. It was not a fake thing. It was not a media buzz or anything. But I think it's important, and a couple of insiders and people who cover Big Ten sports have tweeted this, and I think it's very important for those who may not understand it. It's ultimately not going to come down to Kevin Warren. It's not going to come down to the president of the United States, the coaches, the players, the parents. It's going to come down to the university presidents, and right now that just doesn't seem likely that they will reverse anything that's happened. I think the Big Ten would look really bad if, first off, I think we're finding out that the Big Ten's decision was a little rushed. I think if you ask me now, I'm starting to think that maybe they could have waited here until September to make the call, or at least late in August, maybe push back the start date. But we were supposed to have Big Ten football in 2 days, Indiana at Wisconsin, but that's not happening. And I think their decision, it just wouldn't look good if in early August they decided, you know what, we can't have football in September, but then all of a sudden they reverse things and we have football in October. I can't imagine that happening. Maybe November, but I still stand by. I don't think a spring season is going to work because I think a spring season jeopardizes the fall season of 2021. So I think Big Ten fans are just kind of in a mess right now. Their emotions are being toyed with, but I think it's important to know that there's still the possibility that nothing comes out of this, no football comes out of this, and we're just stuck watching the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC, assuming that they are able to go as planned. A couple other things, Mitchell and Murray, game 7 last night. Murray and the Nuggets got the best of Mitchell. What a great series that was in the NBA. And then also the NFL seems to have a decent grasp on the virus. They're putting out some preliminary testing reports that seem pretty promising for the NFL right now. They seem to have a pretty good grasp on things. I think the players understand the magnitude of the situation. They don't want it to be the healthiest team is going to win the Super Bowl. So everybody trying to stay healthy, everybody trying to be smart and give themselves an opportunity to go win the Super Bowl here in a couple of weeks when things get started. All right, we have our guest. He's joined our call here. Let's welcome him in. He is a former U.S. men's national team defender and now a current Fox Sports soccer commentator, Alexi Lalas. Alexi, thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Can you hear me? Are we all good?
Yeah, we're all good. All set
Okay.
up with the podcast equipment there. I love to see it. All right, let's talk about that. I mean, what's kind of keeping you busy right now during quarantine? What have you kind of been up to the past couple months?
Yeah, I mean, my normal job is working for Fox Sports, and my normal weekly existence before the craziness of 2020 was being out there on the road and talking about soccer and going to different venues and cities and traveling all over the place. And obviously all of that is shut down. We're very fortunate here. I live in Los Angeles to be working out of the studio. So we've had soccer games, both domestic leagues and international soccer that's come into us where we've worked out of the actual studio. Now that didn't happen immediately. I did a lot of stuff right where you're looking at me right now, out of my house, as a lot of people did, and the whole Zoom life is real and I continue to do some of that, but we're slowly getting back to a little bit more normalcy when it comes to our job of talking about soccer, but we're still very far away from what what normal life has been. So hopefully we get back sooner rather than later. But as you know, 2020 has been interesting and challenging, to say the least, for everybody involved, not just in sports, but in everything that we do.
Yeah, we have some very nice facilities here at IU that we just can't really use right now. So we're just kind of stuck doing Zooms at home. I want to get to your playing days, your broadcasting career, and all that stuff. Let's start with your playing career. I mean, you had such a successful collegiate career. When was it that you realized, okay, this is something I want to do professionally. This is something I can do professionally. And you realize this is something I'm really good at?
Well, I mean, look, you're in college, and you know that when you get to college, oftentimes you're exposed to so many new things, and it really you change. Even though it's only 4 years, it can be an incredibly influential part of your life. And for me, when I got to Rutgers University out there, exit 9 off the turnpike out there in New Jersey, I was dropped into a situation, circumstances that forced me to adjust, but it also gave me incredible tools, both the soccer part of it, because it was a very good soccer program, but also, maybe more importantly, it's the State School of New Jersey. There's 30,000, 40,000 people there. And, I was from Michigan. I grew up in Detroit. I went to a very small prep school in Detroit. And so this was a very different type of experience for me. And from a soccer perspective, I was playing against much better competition with better players and against better players. And I was getting better coaching, better facilities, all of that kind of ramped up. But I didn't grow up, unfortunately, as a generation, as an American soccer player, thinking that I could play in a World Cup or thinking that I would be professional. It just wasn't something that I thought about. And so when I got to college and started to play at a higher level and started to get some more attention and success, the thought about potentially doing something like that crept in, which is completely different than the way it happens today. It was just a sign of the times, in that was what happened. So college changed me on a number of fronts, not the least of which is soccer.
Well, yeah, I was going to transition to that. I mean, it feels like college soccer has changed a lot here with who even comes to college soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the game having changed since you were at Rutgers? And is the time over where someone like you goes to college, goes into the MLS, becomes a World Cupper? Is that kind of time over? Are we seeing most World Cuppers are going to be just straight out of high school to the professional leagues?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, that's where it's heading. And that's, I think, where young soccer players will look as far as their path to, to being a professional, whether it's to play with the World Cup or in the World Cup or with the national team or not, even just to be a professional. I think that the bypassing of college is going to be much more of the norm. And it's a pity, but it's completely understandable. You know that the college experience, we just talked about how beneficial it can be. And I worry that we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater in this effort to create a better soccer player. At times, I think we are willingly sending them out there unequipped with some of the tools that you do learn in college that do actually make you a better athlete. And if you're always in a bubble and that's all that's fine and well. But the socialization process, the responsibility process, all of those different things that come from going to college, I do believe. And we talk so much about in our game, the 90 minutes that you play on the field of soccer. And sometimes we forget that that other 22 and a half hours is equally as important. And sometimes what you have to function in that other 22 and a half hours enables you to do that 90 minutes right. And so, but we also know that, you know, you were just talking before I came on about, you know, the power that exists in college, especially in college sports, and, you know, the behemoth that college is and how difficult it is to turn. So while there are changes that I think could benefit the American soccer player, and by the way, benefit college soccer, it's really, really difficult to change because college soccer does not drive the, you know, the direction of where sports goes. You're beholden to other bigger sports. And that's, you know, that's a pity, because I think we're going to lose out on something that, if harnessed correctly, could really be a force for good and something really unique that enables us to develop players while also giving them the tools they need, not necessarily to be a soccer player, but to be a human being in 2020 and beyond.
Well, I mean, we have a great college program here at IU,
Sure.
and I have covered it for a couple of years now. It's awesome. I mean, you get some really good players. You just don't get those like World Cup type of players anymore, which is always disappointing. But you were on a couple of World Cup teams. You're on an Olympic team. We've had a couple of Olympians on, and we've talked about what the difference is. I mean, what was for you the difference between putting on maybe an MLS kit versus walking out there, putting on a United States of America kit and playing for your country?
Well, you know, the pride that one feels playing for a club is very different. It can be, you know, as powerful, but it's a very different type of pride. You know, the the opportunity and the responsibility, and let's be honest, the privilege of being somebody that goes out there and represents your country in an Olympics, in a World Cup, in that ultimate stage where you get to go out and you get to, you know, carry out your flag, and you get to stand for the national anthem, and you get to put your hand over your heart, and you get to sing, and you get to celebrate all the good things. And there are lots of good things about our country. It's absolutely flawed, without a doubt, and there's plenty of challenges and problems that we have, but at its core, I do believe it's the greatest country in the world. And so for me, that opportunity to celebrate that in the form of soccer, and to honor that, I never took that for granted. And if I'm 50 years old right now, and if Greg Berhalter, the U.S. men's national team coach, turned around one day and pointed up in the stands and said, "Hey, can you give me 20 minutes?" It would still be an honor, and I would come running down the stairs and do my best to serve my team, and in our capacity as soccer players to serve our country. And look, I was never in the military, and the men and women that sacrifice, and some make the ultimate sacrifice for us to represent our country, that's at a whole nother level. But, you know, in our small way, stepping on the field and representing your country, it was incredibly moving. And as I said, just a wonderful honor and a privilege to be able to do it, because so few are able to do it. And so I recognized, even in the moment, that this was rarefied air, and to honor it by the things that I did and the things that I said, and to represent the country that I love to the best of my abilities, regardless of the scoreline.
I'm sure you have some memories. I mean, 2 World Cups, an Olympic. I mean, what are some of those experiences like for those of us who may never be fortunate enough to do that?
So I was in the '92 Olympics, and for people that maybe are too young or don't remember, that was in Barcelona, Spain, and that was the Olympics of the Dream Team, the first time that the United States sent the actual professional and full-on basketball team. So I remember vividly walking out in the opening ceremonies, and, you know, over here on my left was Jennifer Capriati, an incredible tennis player for the U.S. Over here was Jim Courier, another tennis player. Then, you know, Magic Johnson's over here, and all of these, you know, incredible athletes. And, you know, the Dream Team was the thing. They didn't stay in the Olympic Village with us. They were off in a wonderfully posh and beautiful hotel. But, you know, that was, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget walking out onto the field in the opening ceremonies and looking up in the stands and seeing, just this swath of dignitaries, including guys like, like Nelson Mandela and Fidel Castro, and so many different types of luminaries, as I said, from the world, the political world, the sports world, the entertainment world, and everything. And it was very heady. It was nuts. And you have to pinch yourself in moments like that. And then a couple years later, to be involved in an actual World Cup. And for a soccer player, while the Olympics are important, the World Cup is even more important, and it's even more of a moment because of what it represents for your sport. And look, the reason why I'm talking to you today is because of the summer of 1994. And for those, again, that are too young, in 1994, we hosted the Men's World Cup. I mean the United States, and it was everything. It changed my life forever. I lived the power of what a World Cup can do to an individual, and it's never been the same. And as I said, because of that, all of the different opportunities, and it was this jumping off point for me where my life, as I said, changed, and it's never been the same.
We had somebody on who was a baseball Olympian, and he said he barely slept in his time at the Olympic Village. Did you get any sleep while you were there?
It is this strange type of situation. So in '96, when I went to the Olympics, for people that don't know, soccer is such a big thing, and actually such a big money generator, even for the Olympics, that they actually have to put it in satellites, because if you put it all in the city that it's happening, there wouldn't be enough stadiums. So actually in '96, we were satellited out of Birmingham, Alabama, and Washington, D.C. So we weren't actually at the Atlanta venues. And in 1992, we started in Barcelona, which is why it was wonderful to kind of get into that Olympic Village and then do that walk. There's so much there. They put so much in. It can be distracting, to be quite honest. And coaches and federations oftentimes are guarding against those distractions, because it's everything you want to do, everything you want to eat, everything that you want to, from movies and TV and games, and they pack this little town, and so it can be overwhelming. I'll be honest with you. I did try to get sleep. I did understand why I was there, but I can certainly relate and understand how some people, it's sensory overload in this very small place of all type A, very intense, fit individuals all in one place. The Olympic Village is unlike anything that I've ever seen. It would be a wonderful, I suppose, documentary to go in from start to finish and to see how what it does mirror of society and what it doesn't mirror of society.
Well, I have to ask, because when you go online and you see Alexi Lalas' Wikipedia page, it says you're most famous for the hair and the beard that you were rocking. What do you think you're more famous for? Your play as the defender, or the crazy hair you had rocking back then?
Well, look, without the hair, it would have been something different. Look, you can't just have one or the other and make the impact. I grew up, as I said, not really looking to soccer or soccer players. My wall was papered with mostly hockey players and musicians, and especially when it comes to music. I've always considered myself an entertainer and a performer, and sometimes people cringe when you say that as an athlete, because to them it seems to mean that you don't take it seriously or you're not competitive, and that could not be further from the case. I do take it seriously. I am competitive. I just recognize that I'm performing in front of people, and your costume and the things and the way that you say things, they can have a dramatic effect on the impact on others. And I was very, very comfortable from the beginning with going about my job in that way. And so I knew that the way that I looked could translate and transmit a certain image. I was very conscious even back then. Nowadays they call them brands, but I was very conscious of my individual brand and being able to cultivate that. And I was very comfortable in it. Don't get me wrong. You can't wear a costume if it's completely uncomfortable to you, because it will affect your performance. I was very comfortable with it, but I also knew the impact and the effect that that had. And I don't begrudge any player for recognizing that. And if you don't want that as part of your brand, that's still a brand. But you know, I love being and performing in front of people. And if you don't want that, then go out on Sunday to your local park and run around. But I love the interaction. By the way, the positive or negative. If 100,000 people are cheering for me, that's great. If 100,000 people are cheering against me, in a certain way, that's even better. I love it. And maybe it's just, something innate in me, and playing a villain is just as much fun as playing a hero out there.
Well, I know you were a defender, but you scored some goals. What's a notable goal to you that still stands out that was kind of a memorable one?
Let's see. In '93, I scored against England, which was, England and what England has always represented. That's always a cool thing. In '95, I scored against Argentina, and after the game, Maradona came up and was at the game and congratulated us because we ended up beating his Argentina, and so scoring against Argentina and beating Argentina. Those types of moments are great. And as you said, I'm a defender, so there's not a lot of moments I get to celebrate like that and to just put the ball in the back of the net. But every once in a while, it went where I wanted it to go, and those are those are memories. Not just the goal, but the game, and those are both associated with games that we won. And so that competitive side, and that there's something special about doing it just in the first place, but then doing it within an actual win against great teams like England and against great teams like Argentina. That's pretty cool. And I parlayed that success in 1994 into an opportunity to go over to Europe and to play in Italy. And I had just a crazy and wonderful experience over there that once again changed me for going through it.
How different, since you've been to Italy, you've played in these World Cups, how different is the soccer for those who may not understand it overseas versus here in the States?
The actual soccer is not as different as you would think. It's much more about what surrounds the game. For some people don't realize, and it's a good thing that this has changed. When I stepped on the field in 1994, whether it's me or Kobe Jones or a handful of others, we had actually never been on the books of a club team. We did it very differently than you normally do it, where you go, you play for a club, you do well for a club, you get seen by the national team, you get called in by the national team, you do well for the national team, and then you kick on from there. Which is to say that when we stepped on the field, while we had international experience, because all we did was play international games and play with the national team, we functioned kind of like a club. We had never been in those types of club environments, those traditional ones. And so when I got to Italy after the World Cup, it was my first time at a club. And I was in the fishbowl that is soccer over in Europe, and in particular in Italy. And so it's learning a new language. It's functioning in that culture, that fishbowl. It's understanding that the what it means each and every week to the fans and to that community is at a whole nother level, because there's nothing else. That's all that they care about. There's not the competition with other sports. There's not the history of other sports. And so that was, that was eye-opening to me. And so you gotta hit the ground running. You don't know the language. It's a new culture, and they blow the whistle when you get there, and you better figure it out. And you very quickly figure out that, it's a very good league with incredible players and great teams. It's still the same game that you've been playing, and it's just much more steeped in history. And certainly there's times where you're playing against much better teams. Now that's changed a whole lot over the years, but that was what I was dealing with at the time.
Well, let's tap into some of your commentator career. And I want to get your thoughts on where U.S. soccer is right now. Obviously, 2017, 2018, a bit of a low point, not qualifying for the World Cup. But what have they done in the years since that makes you believe 2022 will be different?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right that, not qualifying for the 2018 Men's World Cup was an epic failure by the U.S. National team. And it understandably drew out all the worst fears and anxiety and angst that, to be quite honest, has always existed in US soccer. But there was something to kind of pin it on. And that's completely understandable and fair, as I said. I remain bullish about this next generation for a number of reasons, and whether it's rattling off the Pulisics and the Weston McKennies and Tyler Adams and the players that are playing right now at big clubs over in Europe, or the great and what I think could be great future players that are playing domestically in your Jordan Morrises and your Brendan Aaronsons and these types of players that I think are going to help make up not just the team for the next World Cup in 22, but also 2026. And I think there is this rampway going up to 2026. They also, I think that this generation recognizes that previous team that didn't qualify, did fail. And so they see something where they can be the ones that bring us back to the promised land. And look, qualifying for a World Cup should not be cause for celebration. Notwithstanding what happened a few years ago, we've always qualified for a World Cup in certainly in my generation and beyond. So we should qualify for a World Cup. We are that good that where we should expect to qualify for a World Cup every time. But right now, that's where that first challenge is. And whoever does that will already have done more than what the previous team did. And so I think they recognize that, hey, this is our opportunity to do that and then to do some good things and kind of say, not on our watch. That's not happening. We are a different group and we're going to show you something special.
Do you think maybe sitting back and watching the women's team do so well, win the World Cup, they're always dominant, does that help fuel the men's team possibly to kind of give them some extra motivation?
I think that even back in my day when the women's team was also dominant, there was certainly an element of pride and fascination with what they were doing. There might even have been, and there might still be, a little bit of resentment in terms of the attention that they get, but it's earned, and America loves winners, and that's what they do on and off the field. They are incredible, and they are a machine. I think they're very, very different circumstances and situations between the two in terms of where we are and what we have done from a women's perspective, and where we are with the men's team and with the men's side of the game. But I think that there are lessons to be learned, and I do think that the men's team can find some different things that the women do that could help us going forward. Now, some of it just doesn't apply because of the different levels that we are at, and just the reality of the situation. If you were to put the U.S. men's national team equivalent in the women's game, I mean, we would be very far down the pecking order. And if you were to put the U.S. women's national team in the men's game, a parallel would be, you're talking about France or Brazil or the absolute elites of the game. And we, from a men's national team perspective, are not there yet. We're trying to close that gap, and I do believe we will close that gap, but it'll be done in a very different and separate way, I think, relative to the women's national team. And by no means, that doesn't mean it's any less incredible or worthy of our celebration what they're doing. As a matter of fact, let's be honest, they're the ones that are driving so much of the narrative, both in terms of on the field and off the field, specifically because of that constant fuel that they have of winning and being the best in the world, whether it's collectively as a team or the individual players that we have. And they bring us pride almost every single year in terms of the amount of winning that they do.
Well, you mentioned closing the gap. How important is a guy like Pulisic, who's having a great year overseas? He kind of exploded after the pandemic, coming out with Chelsea. I know he just got hurt, but could he be that quote unquote savior? I mean, could he be the guy that kind of leads the U.S. back in the right direction?
He can't do it alone. But look, he's an undeniable talent. And I love the fact that, he had a good run of games. And that in and of itself is important because, you mentioned the fact that he got hurt again. And this has been a problem now, unfortunately, for him, is that these fits and starts, and just when he gets going, he seems to have these injuries, and they're not always really major, but they stop that consistency and that flow. If he stays healthy, he can absolutely be one of the great players in the world. He's playing for a big team that draws a lot of attention. And what that does really is it improves the credibility of American soccer and American soccer players. And we need that. We are constantly in search and craving and striving for not just credibility, but relevance. And it's a gradual and slow process, but each one of these players that does well, and it's been decades and decades now, it's just chipping away at the consciousness out there and making people realize that there is quality when it comes to American soccer and American men's soccer. There are quality players that are worth the money and worth your time, and that that American stigma that for so long has been attached to so many of us at different times is starting to fade away. And Christian is a wonderful example, and he's a wonderful conduit for maybe a change in the way that people perceive American soccer players.
Well, here in the States, the MLS just finished up the MLS is Back tournament. Where has that league changed since you were a part of it, and the US sports soccer scene in general? How has that changed?
Oh my goodness. I mean, so I was back in the 1900s when I was running around in the previous century. MLS started up in 1996, and I'd be lying if I told you that we envisioned what MLS has become. It was the hope that it was going to be successful. We just wanted to survive the first couple of years because our history and our soccer history is littered with leagues and defunct type of leagues and teams. So that's the good news. As an older soccer person, I remain incredibly proud of the fact that there is a generation, and you're even part of that generation that has grown up and has grown up with soccer as part of their sports landscape, has grown up with MLS as part of their professional American sports landscape. And from a player perspective, a whole generation that has grown up that doesn't know any of the challenges. And it was the Wild West, and it was challenging back then. And, grows up with, incredible soccer stadiums, soccer specific stadiums in their home markets, great training facilities, whether it's the coaching that has improved so much, charter flight, all these different things. And they don't know a time where it wasn't like that. And I don't want them to know. I don't need them to know, to be quite honest. I want human beings, we want for our next generation to have it better. And so it makes me proud. I don't need to be the grumpy old guy talking about how difficult it was back in the day, and I don't need them to even realize that. That's not what it's about. I want them to make it better for the next generation that comes after them. That is important to me, and it is better. It's so much better. It's night and day from the moment we stepped on the field in 1996. However, I will maintain that it is one of the proudest moments of my life, stepping on that field in 1996 and starting something that we hoped, we didn't know, but we hoped was going to last, and was not just going to last for our careers, but last well beyond our lifetimes. And to be able to say that you were there from the start, there's not a lot of times in life where you get to be there from the start of something that potentially is going to last beyond your lifetime.
I have friends who are in the USL now. They're broadcasting in that, and here in Indiana, a lot of people around the Indy 11. They love the USL team. So that's definitely growing as well. Let's go to your career itself in the television industry. You've called a couple or been a part of broadcast for a couple World Cups. You've been with Fox Sports since 2015. What's your experience been like taking yourself off the pitch and putting yourself under a headset?
It's been everything. I am incredibly fortunate and privileged to be able to at 50 years old, not having kicked a ball for multiple decades now, to still actually be involved in soccer and to make my living in soccer. And, I tell people all the time that in our industry, and it is our industry, and you will jump into it with both feet at a certain point, and you're already well ahead of most of the people that I meet, and certainly well ahead of anything that I ever did. But what you will find is that there are a lot of people in our industry, especially in the ex-player and ex-coach type, or ex front office types, that are just passing through and using it as a way station until something better comes along. And it's completely understandable. I get it. You can get away with that for a little bit, but I think ultimately it will manifest itself in your performance. And I think ultimately you're cheating not just yourself, but the viewer. I want to be surrounded by people that are junkies for this, and I am a junkie for this. I've learned a lot. I've certainly improved, but I still got a long way to go. I still make plenty of mistakes, and I can still get a whole lot better. But it has opened up an avenue in my life, and that has enabled me to express myself, to be creative, to perform, to continue to perform, relative to a sport that I love and that is still in my life. And I'm so thankful for it. It is not for everybody. It has its own specific challenges, unlike anything else out there. But if you do get that bug and you are into it and you love it and you are a junkie, you don't want to do anything else. And people ask me all the time, do you want to coach? You want to do? I don't want to do anything else. I want to do TV. I want to continue to do TV. And I am a junkie like that. And, if in the future I wanted to do something else, I'd do everything I could in my power to make that happen. But right now, because also I think our sport needs it. Soccer needs people talking about it and debating it, and going back and forth and hot taking this and that, because that's what all sports are. And we don't have enough of it. And we certainly don't have enough platforms, certainly not enough traditional platforms. We got a lot of non-traditional ones out there that have kind of picked up the mantle and talk about it and debate about it. I recognize and recognized early on in my career that how I say things is as important as what I say. Once again, that performance aspect of it. And if I go out there trying to please everybody, I'm not going to please anybody. And inevitably people are going to disagree, and at times vehemently disagree with the things that you say. That's not your problem. And as a matter of fact, if all you are saying is what people agree with, to be quite honest, it's I'm not sure you're doing your job, and you're certainly not being interesting and entertaining. And I'm not saying you say stuff or the opposite just to say what people aren't saying, but you do this long enough, you are going to have opinions out there that people disagree with. And if you're doing it well, even when they disagree with you, they will still respect the fact that you have that opinion. And as long as we're doing it in a cordial and a civil and a respectful type of way, it's good. And sometimes, we skirt the line of civil and respectful, but that's okay. Sports, as you know, it raises passions, unlike anything else, maybe than, I don't know, politics or something like that.
Well, you mentioned some of those people that are passing through, and that was going to be my next question. Was, I think a lot of people think that transition from player or coach to commentator is easier than it really is. I mean, what were some of the difficulties that you had going from player to broadcaster, and what have you seen some people struggle with?
Yeah, so just because you were a good player or a player at all doesn't mean you are any good at television, okay? Just because you seem to have given good quote during your career doesn't mean that you're good at television. And it really is a trial by fire. And you try to hedge your bets when you're looking at people that could potentially be good, but it is a very different type of performance. It's much more work than people realize. And if you're doing it well, it doesn't look like it's a lot of work. If you're doing it well, it looks like that you are, just kind of having that conversation at the bar or on the couch or in the back of the bus or wherever it ends up being. That's the trick and that's the magic. But behind that, I tell young ex-players that are just trying to start out and maybe thinking about this all the time. It's the iceberg theory. When you see me on television, it's what you're seeing is only a tip of that iceberg in terms of the information and the things that I am thinking about. Hopefully it's the best stuff. But there's a whole big backlog of stuff there that never makes it to air that is part of the work. And while it doesn't make it to air, it's just as important to have that as that foundation. And that's what makes that tip look good. And a lot of times when people first get into the business, they think that their background is just going to do it for them. Yes, having that context and that background can help and can add, but it's not going to do it alone. And you realize that very, very quickly. And sometimes, unfortunately, by the time you realize it, either you're on air and it happens in front of a lot of people, or it's too late and somebody else is taking your place. Because guess what? There is always somebody else out there that's willing to take your place. And what you did on the field at times can get you in the door, but it can't keep you in the door. And that door will shut and things will move on and they will go on to other people who are better at doing television. And that's what you're doing, is you're doing television. You are in a competitive environment again. And those tools and those skills that you had as a player, as much as they may inform what things that you talk about, they are of little value at times when you're actually doing it. And these are all things that you find out along the way. And I talk to, as I said, not kids anymore, but I talk to younger players and young ex-players all the time, even players that are playing right now that are thinking about it. And I love the fact that their wheels are turning and they're thinking about it, because your career is going to end. As important as it may be, it's finite. It starts, it finishes. It may define you for the rest of your life, but it's going to stop. And it probably isn't going to stop when you want it. And so you better be prepared to have your eyes open for a jumping off point and recognize those opportunities and think twice before you turn them down, because when you want them to be there, they might not be there.
I love that. I think so many people think if you're an ex-player, an ex-coach, you could just slide right in, but I love it. It's competitive.
Well, here's the other thing is that, I've worked with so many people over the years in my time with Fox and ESPN, and even before I was doing stuff. And there are people out there that I've worked with that have never kicked a ball in their life, and certainly not at the level that I have. And they are incredibly articulate and insightful and interesting and entertaining. And there are people that I've worked with that have kicked the ball at a much higher level than I ever kicked a ball, were much more successful, were without a doubt better soccer players than I will ever have been, and had more talent in their pinky toe than I had in my entire body. And yet when they try to talk about the game in the way that we do with our job, there's nothing there. There's nothing there in terms of interesting or insightful or entertaining type of comments. Now, the opposites can be true also. There are some people that have no context or feel for the game that aren't able to translate that. My point is that I don't look at your CV, to be quite honest with you. I don't care about your resume. You need to perform for me in that moment. If I'm sitting down with my clicker, there's a million other channels that I can go to. Why should I stick here? Maybe, you're saying something interesting. And I don't know a lot about other sports. I know enough, but when I go to another sport and I'm watching, a lot of times I don't know the history of this person that is talking. The people that are into the game do. But if that person isn't interesting, if that person isn't saying something that's at times, as I said, interesting, insightful, provocative, entertaining, all of those different things, I'll go somewhere else. And it doesn't really matter how good that person was on the field to me. If you can marry both of those up, and not only were you a great player, but you're great in the booth or in the studio or anything like that, now you're cooking, because there is a credibility that comes with that career. And let's be honest, that's why you're being hired in the first place, is to bring that credibility. And they believe that you're able to use that credibility, but not completely lean on that credibility, because you also have to develop other tools and skills in order to be good on television.
Well, I'll let you go on this. You've been hosting a podcast. I believe it's called State of the Union.
Yep.
Where did that idea stem from? Where did your passion and interest in podcasting come from?
Oh man, I've been doing podcasts for years, probably before you or anybody that's listening or watching this were born. I mean, the whole podcast landscape has completely exploded, and everybody's got a podcast, it seems, and that's a good thing. I was mentioning the the lack of platforms that soccer and traditional platforms that soccer has. And so, even back in the day, soccer people found ways to get in contact, and whether it was big soccer boards, or even before that, fanzines or something like that. And it's just grown into the whole podcasting and blogs and all that kind of stuff. But it's grown into the whole podcasting thing. And every team now has a podcast. Every supporters group has a podcast. And the tendency is to say, oh, there's just too much. No, it's not too much. It's great. It's wonderful. It's a way that we communicate. It's a way that we express ourselves. To be quite honest, it's also a wonderful way of disseminating information out there. And it gives us, in a non-traditional way, and maybe it's becoming traditional, but relative to the past, a non-traditional way of communicating. And I love it. And some are better than others. I like to think that State of the Union podcast is good. We come at it from through the lens of of the American soccer game. And American soccer fans are incredible in terms of their knowledge, in terms of their history, in terms of the fact that they have had to be incredibly proficient and knowledgeable, like I said, about leagues all over the world. And they're incredibly diverse, and and they think about the game in a different way. And I love that. And I love celebrating that. And that's what we do on the State of the Union podcast. It comes out every week. You can find it on all the different channels out there. And, I continue to do the Fox work. I'm heading off right after this, off to the studio. We got some MLS action this week. So I'll be screaming and yelling about that. And, I love to do it. I love this game. And I love the fact that people are continuing to employ me. I know others don't, but I happen to like it. So does my family. So we can talk about the game that we know and love.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us here. Really enjoyed the conversation. Best of luck to you. Love watching you on TV. So keep up the good work.
Let me just congratulate you and wish you well going forward. What you're doing here, I know it's small to you and maybe inconsequential to you, but it's so important, and I'm so glad, and it warms my heart that there are so many younger people, certainly younger than I, that that are looking to sports. And it's not necessarily just soccer. I know you talk about all different sports, but looking to do this. And if you are lucky enough to get into the industry, you will find that there's good and bad parts, just like any industry, and that you'll have ups and downs. But ultimately, that love for the sports and maybe that love for the people that are behind all of these sports and drive all of these sports is really what is going to push you forward. But you're already ahead of the game because you're already doing things that I think are going to help you, regardless of what avenue and what part of the industry you may find yourself in. And there's so many good people. I'm in front of the camera, but there's so many incredible people behind the camera that make us look good. And there's so many different jobs, and it is a fascinating industry. And by the way, it's a changing industry, as mm-hmm. And your ability to bob and weave and to change with it and to understand how fundamentally, even in this moment in 2020, it's changing is important. I know you were talking to Stephen Goff yesterday or whatever, and he was talking about how the industry and the sports industry has changed. And so it's fascinating to see you and your generation are going to drive it forward when I'm long gone. And I wish you well in everything that you're doing. And thank you for having me on.
Well, I appreciate that. That was great. Thanks so much, Alexi. Best of luck to you. Appreciate your time.
No problem. See ya.
All right. Take care. That was Alexi Lalas, former defender for the U.S. men's national team and a current commentator on Fox Sports. Really great to have him on, and a huge thanks again to Dean Linke for hooking us up with some really awesome guests this week. Having Alexi on, absolutely fantastic. I really hope everyone enjoyed that interview as much as I did here in the captain's seat. We've had some really awesome guests, as he alluded to there at the end. Steve Goff, as well as Paul Shuey, former MLB reliever, and Steve Goff, a Washington Post soccer reporter. Both were on the Monday episode. We had a double episode on Monday, and it was awesome. So go back and listen to that. You can watch it on our IU Sports Media YouTube page, or you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. Huge thank you to Alexi Lalas for joining us. We'll be back on Friday, 10 a.m. Kevin Bowen of 1070 The Fan is coming on. We'll talk Pacers. We'll talk Colts as the Indianapolis sports team starts to heat up here with the Colts getting ready to get the season started. We'll be back on Friday with Kevin Bowen. But until then, for Alexi Lalas, I'm Austin Render saying so long from today's episode of Unpaid Interns.